Hello and welcome to another episode of Evolution Now. I'm your host, Flora White, and today I am delighted to be here with my friend and yours, Diana Feinstein. Diana is a transformation coach and specialist who works with high-achieving professionals age 40 plus to take a 360 perspective of their health from sleep, nutrition, intimacy, diet, to all aspects of their well-being, to really tap into the power of perimenopause and menopause at this unique phase of life. This is going to be segment 1 of 2 with Diana because there is so much to cover, and as we know, health is wealth. So it's my pleasure to talk with Diana about her evolution now. Diana, I'm so excited to be here with you today. We're going to be talking about perimenopause, menopause, and all the do's and don'ts, things we need to know, mindsets, hacks, insights, leveraging your expertise in this conversation. So let's dive in. What is perimenopause and menopause? How do we know when we're experiencing it?
So this is a really great question, and it's also really nuanced. Perimenopause can start as early as 35 for a lot of women, and so a lot of perimenopause symptoms, it's best to actually get your hormones tested to see like whether or not there's actual onset. A lot of the areas that I focus on in terms of perimenopause are perimenopause and menopause hygiene practices. So as we're transitioning around the stage in our life, what is the equivalent of like brushing our teeth 2 minutes in the morning and 2 minutes at night, right?
I love that.
Okay, so like those 4 minutes, they alleviate 95% of our cavities. So instead of thinking of, I'm in perimenopause now, I need to do these things because I'm in perimenopause, what are actually health hygiene practices that I would like to give to like my children, right? And so demographic is busy, high-achieving professionals. And what happens is because a lot of hormonal profiles change, estrogen starts coming down, testosterone starts coming down, that's actually inversely correlated with stress. So think about estrogen and testosterone as stress buffers that slowly start to diminish over time. So as a sandwich generation, our kids, are very demanding. We start launching into like the peak of our careers and we're taking care of our parents all at the same time. And so that load in combination with all of those stress buffers that are starting to decrease, I'm going to call it midlife, it actually amplifies a lot of systems that we used to have a get out of jail free card. And so in our like 20s and our 30s, you could go out until, 2 in the morning and like bounce right back. But again, because of those hormonal profile changes, we need a new form of succession planning when our hormones are starting to drop off.
Why would our bodies do that to us? Reduce our estrogen at the same time that we're dealing with so much with kids, with parents towards the latter part of their lives. What's the science behind that?
So I really love this question. I want you to think about 2 types of risk. So I was in finance, and there were 2 types of risks that we would assess. Systemic risk, systems that are inherent in our system, and asystemic risk that's actually bespoke to like that one person. If we think about the shifts that have been happening in our society, families have started later on in life. And so this idea of the sandwich generation, they didn't exist 50, 100 years ago. And so we are getting squeezed in a way that our bodies weren't necessarily biologically wired to do. So average lifespan right now is about 80. But our biological evolution had evolved over like thousands of years. And so we have this like hyper acceleration that's been happening in our society where our biology isn't actually keeping up with the rate of change that our society is changing with. So there are a lot of issues that are coming up that our parents didn't necessarily see. Something that happened in the 1970s was the industrialization of food. So if you take a Google shot, beaches in like the 1970s versus beaches in 2025, you're going to see that there is a very stark difference. Food has gotten hyper palatable. It has become very easily accessible, and it has become highly processed, which is why we actually have an obesity epidemic. A lot of these like perimenopause and menopause symptoms are a function of increased inflammation, which is a function of like our like food supply. So it's a convergence of like so many things that are happening all at once at the same time. And so the way I see it, it's like a multifactorial problem.
Fascinating. So it has to do with our lifespan increasing, resources that we now have access to, like processed foods, our biology not catching up to our extended lifespan. That is so interesting, Diana. So building on that, what are some hygiene activities that we can participate in on a regular basis as we get into this chapter of our lives? And really, how do we know that we're even in it?
So I love this question. So here at Max Packed Health, I focus on 4 levers. I focus on fueling, recovery, movement, and stress management. So let's start with fueling. Fueling I'm defined as anything that you put in your mouth. So you can have suboptimal fuel, or you can have fuel that actually is giving you a sense of like satisfaction, like nutrient density satisfaction. 80% of a lot of symptoms that are coming up in perimenopause and menopause, it actually can be resolved by optimizing your diet. And baseline, if you were to like really bring it down to a reductive sense, it's anything that has a skin or a peel. So it's not coming out of a box, it's not coming out of a bag, it has a skin or a peel. And so the closer it is to Mother Nature, the more our bodies are actually able to process it.
Does that actually delay menopause?
It supports our biology. Menopause is inevitable. The symptoms don't necessarily have to be. And so like when you have a lot of these changes, like what is actually your bespoke succession planning? And menopause is just so unique to every single woman out there. So there's no way of knowing that you're in it necessarily. What I would recommend for a lot of people is like really starting in their mid-30s. You really do have to start taking care of yourself in a way that you may have not necessarily considered. Or protein requirements go up significantly at that time. So you could have literally not changed your diet at all from the age of 35, and all of a sudden you've gained 30 pounds. All of a sudden you have a belly that you didn't necessarily notice, you didn't necessarily have, and it's because of the way your hormones have actually change that fat distribution. And so in order to fuel that muscle mass, which is a function of your metabolism, you actually need that protein to fuel that muscle growth.
So like how many grams of protein do we need? I talk about this with my girlfriends. We're
Yeah.
like, we know we need to be taking in more protein.
Yeah.
How much?
So something easy, 1 gram of protein per pound, right? And there are different studies where you can use your target weight or you can use like your current weight. That being said, if you're a woman 5'4" and like 150 pounds, to get 150 grams of protein, that's a lot. That's a lot. And if you do that like right off the bat, like you're at risk of constipation. So what I would recommend to people is understand what your current baseline is without shame and without judgment. And what would just a little bit better, a little bit more protein look like. And if you have that titration, your body is actually able to like better process that amount of protein, that is needed. So if we think about what a serving of protein is, it's the size of your palm. So if you start with just 1 palm of protein at each meal, that's a really great starting point. And then you slowly inch your way up. So for influencers or scientists like, Stacey Sims or Dr. Marie Haver, those are great starting points. I always believe in, N of 1, right? One size fails all. And so when you take, what an expert says as a starting point, then you can actually understand from your biological standpoint, what is actually going to work for me given that rule, if that makes sense. Yeah.
It does. And I know that you do so much more than just nutrition, and you take a really customized approach. Can you share a bit more about how you look at this phase of life and, the way you approach it in general?
Yeah. I see as perimenopause and menopause as an invitation for satisfaction. So there is this thing called the bikini complex, which all women, whether subconscious or conscious, have been exposed to. The thin at all costs, take away all carbs, take away all fats. And then it comes to a place of restriction.
The bikini complex, we look at ourselves in a bikini and we say, I have to look
a certain way.
A certain way.
That's right. That's right. In order for me to do that, I have to restrict. But what if your lifestyle practices were a way to actually chase satisfaction for yourself? What if you could actually have both? When I start working with people, I'm really committed to meeting them where they are. So I put them through a 2-week baseline assessment. And I say, send me everything you put in your mouth without shame and without judgment. And I have you put on a biometric tracker. And you can't change what it is that you aren't aware of. And so after every meal, well, how does this actually make you feel? Oh my God, when I have the croissant with the coffee, all of a sudden I'm crashing at 3:00. And so what happens at night, that actually starts the minute that you open your eyes. There's a concept called blood sugar regulation. It helps you manage your energy. And we become more sensitive to our blood sugar. So if the more balanced our meals are, the more sharp, I guess you'd say, our cognition can become, the better our energy flow is. So glucose regulation is actually one of the most profound things that we can do with women, as women, actually increasing your insulin sensitivity so that you reduce the risk of inflammation that is really like one of the number one killers in health for women.
So I shouldn't have eaten that ice cream sandwich in bed last night at 11 o'clock.
But why does it make sense that we do, though? So instead of shaming it,
Yeah.
right? Like, why does it make sense that we do?
I literally did that because I was exhausted. I'm a mother of 2 kids. It was my treat to myself. And not that we're making this a therapy session for me, but I could have just as easily gone to bed. I was tired, and instead I ate that ice cream sandwich, and then I was a little bit more awake, and I read for a little bit, and then I went to sleep.
Yeah.
And I woke up feeling not so great.
So that phenomenon is called sleep revengeance, and it's a real thing. So instead of willpowering our way through or shaming ourselves into evolution, what if you looked at that experience as like an invitation for like curiosity? Why did it make sense that I do that? Every single one of our behaviors, it's just for a need to get met.
It's because I exercise willpower all day long
Right.
and do for others all day long. So at night I say, well, this is for me. But is it?
Right.
What's really for me would be not eating the ice cream sandwich. Or tell me, like, how would you look at that?
So dairy is often seen as like a form of mothering. So every time someone says to me, I ate the ice cream, it's like, but why does that make so much sense? And so when you come from a place of like compassion and curiosity, you actually start to open up your mind to say, well, what if I'm human and I'm just trying to get my needs met? So what is that underlying need that that ice cream is trying to meet?
Oh, it's a little treat for myself. It's a comfort.
It's a comfort. Right? So like every time we see comfort, we oftentimes go to dairy. Mm-hmm. Right? And so all of these are what are called maladaptive coping mechanisms. Whether we're over shopping on Amazon, scrolling through social media, binge eating, whatever, it's just trying to meet a need. Not everybody's ready for this, but I do what's called like story-based coaching, where what is the underlying need that is trying to get met, and how is your biology, like there are 2 types of food noise. There is the emotional food noise, and then there's the physiological food noise. When you can actually unpack the food noise, which is 50% of what drives all eating behavior, then we can actually work on the story noise. That's a big one, is I deserve it. So when you meet that I deserve it need earlier and more consistently, we don't collapse into ourselves. So what I would encourage like all women is to say, well, why does this make so much sense? And how can I get my needs met in other ways? That's actually what I coach.
Fascinating. That's great. And it doesn't stop with nutrition, right?
Right.
There's way more to it.
That's right.
Sleep, intimacy. What are some other areas that are really key to understand in this phase of life?
So another key one is also movement. Our culture is like, okay, go to the boot camp. One of the core practices that I work on is actually something called nervous system regulation. So our nervous system has either a fight or flight response, or it's a rest and digest. And so if we are under chronic stress or like fight or flight, and we're like consistently revving, our biology actually isn't wired for that. And so a way for it to like turn off or calm down is through the ice cream. It's through actually numbing out. Like your body is just trying to give you signals to turn off. So every time we like do something bad, why does it make sense? What is our nervous system is just like, I'm overtaxed, like I need you to unplug. And that's like the fastest, most accessible way. And so for companies like, let's say like Netflix or like highly processed foods, it becomes like an addiction loop. There is nothing that is addicting as something that almost works.
Ooh, there's nothing as addicting as something that almost works.
So if you think about it, like, does the ice cream work long term? No, it's like a quick fix. It's a hack. And so like, what does sustainability actually look like? And that's really rooted in like emotion. What are our emotional needs that are trying to get met? And so since our hormonal stress buffer, basically our get out of jail free card, since we don't have that reserve anymore, we have women, like we actually need to develop new reserves.
How do we do that?
That's where I get into my framework of deep health, right? There is emotional health, physical health, spiritual health, existential health. And this is actually all based out of a body of work called precision nutrition. And so the more fulfilled we are in like those aspects of health, the less we are likely to actually engage in what are called maladaptive coping mechanisms. So it all make sense. But if you are so riddled with judgment, then you can't actually invite curiosity.
And I would love to talk about judgment. You talk about shame. You talk about how to navigate shame. And I find that so interesting. And it's one of the reasons I love talking to you, because it doesn't just stop with the superficial, with what you put in your mouth or going to bed on time. You're really going deep. Like you said, Diana, deep health.
Yeah.
So how is shame a part of that?
Yeah. So, all of this work is based on Brene Brown. And, she talks about, vulnerability. And so shame and curiosity cannot coexist in the same space.
Shame and curiosity cannot coexist
in the same space. Right? And shame actually dies in the light. And so, one of the things that I'm really committed to here at Max Pact Health is actually creating those safe spaces. Because once you can talk about things that feel hard, that actually melts shame, it melts isolation. Shame will die in the light. And so when we create these safe spaces and you can talk about it, we as humanity can actually enter into vulnerability. And on the other side of that vulnerability is all of our power, joy, and connection. But you can't enter vulnerability if you have shame and judgment.
So how do you help your clients conquer that? Because that seems like a really hard thing to do.
It is really hard. It's not for the faint of heart. And that's why we start with the scaffolding. So I have 2 different lanes that I work with people at Max Pact Health. It's the scaffolding to actually help them do the thing, the food and the exercise and all of the things. And so when you create that scaffolding, when your body is safe, your mind is actually better to come up online. There are just so many layers of why people are in the position that they're in. They're like, oh my God, when I eat a protein-rich breakfast, which is loaded with fiber, and I drink my water, by noon, I feel so much, I don't feel like my hair is on fire, right? When I have a really solid lunch, I actually am not snacking, like a mad woman at 3 o'clock. And that's really based on our biology. Our biology actually tries to reset in line with our circadian rhythms. And if we're not in line with that, just imagine a workplace that is just completely chaotic, nothing functions. Our body is the same exact way. And so if you give it the scaffolding, that is one less layer that you have to work with, one less layer. And oftentimes with people, depending on how, I'm going to call them integrated they are, or how open or willing they are to talk about their feelings, then we can actually converge both lanes at the same time. So, I work with a lot of emotional leaders, and it's well, why did it make sense that I binge ate at night? Why did it make sense that I didn't, do this one thing? My blood sugar was dysregulated. I had a fight with my spouse. I was stressed out at work and my back hurts. Well, of course you're going to eat that. It's the easiest thing to cut off the pain. But again, there's nothing as addicting as something that almost works.
So what do they do instead? How do you get them to stop that?
It's about them coming back to themselves, right? So
and that's hard, and I don't mean to interrupt, but I know that the work you do is not easy, and people have to be really ready for it. Can you kind of tell us about that?
Yeah. So I believe that everybody deserves that clarity. What they choose to do with that clarity is a function of what stage of change they're at, which I can never force. I can just invite. If people are curious, they'll book a call with me. And why is it important that you do this? And then the next step would be let's say my Max Pact Health 2-week program, where they get a biometric tracker and they put everything they put in their mouth without shame and without judgment. And then I just ask them a series of questions. How did it make you feel after you ate that? Well, I felt exhausted. Well, did you know studies have shown yada yada? So we actually combine what it is that they're doing with what the data and the science have said in real time. And so that they can come to a better conclusion every single day during the next 14 days. It's I notice when, I go to Dunkin' Donuts and I have the donut and the coffee, I'm exhausted by 11.
No kidding.
Why don't we have a breakfast experiment and having a protein-rich meal? Now tell me how you feel at 11 o'clock the next day. Oh my God, I feel a lot better. Okay, so then we'll do it again. What happens if, you binge watch Netflix for 5 episodes and now you're up till 2 in the morning? How did that make you feel? Oh, that was really exhausted. Well, did you know the science says X, Y, and Z? And did you know on your biometric tracker, this is what happens to your deep sleep? And when that happens to your deep sleep, this is actually what increases inflammation. One of the core reasons that you signed up was you didn't want to become your mother.
That's so interesting about the deep sleep and the inflammation.
Yeah.
What are some don'ts?
Oh God. So highly processed foods, sugar, lack of stress management, lack of sleep, lack of movement. Those are the biggest things. I have a lot of women that come to me. It's but I do all the creatine and the protein powder and I do the infrared sauna. It's they do all of the hacks, but they don't do the basics. And the basics actually reap you phenomenal rewards. So if you think about, let's say, like a financial instrument, and one financial instrument is given to give you a 5% rate of return, another one is going to give you a 75% rate of return. You're always going to want to give the one that gives a 75% rate of return. But like if you have $1 and you try and put it in a 75% rate of return instrument, that means nothing, right? You don't actually have the baseline that's needed to like optimize the supplements. So it's like it's not that you're flushing money down the toilet, but like if you don't have you're not reaping the rewards because you don't have like the foundational practices. Does that make sense?
It does. And I
Yeah.
love that you come to your practice with, in part, a financial analyst lens.
Yeah.
Having worked in various high-profile banks throughout your years.
Right.
That unique lens is so interesting because health really is the biggest investment you can make in yourself.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
So I'm gonna pause with this story here. I've got 2 kids. I have a 10-year-old and a 15-year-old, and my mother has Alzheimer's. And over the last 2 years, I saw like this really steady decline with her. And within a 4-week time span, she became unrecognizable. And I remember what that felt like. And I told myself that I was not going to give that to my sons. I wasn't going to give it to my husband. I wasn't going to give that to myself. The greatest investment that I can give to my family and to myself is by not having that experience. And there's a great book called The Ends of Alzheimer's. And a lot of it actually talks about inflammation that becomes rampant starting during perimenopause.
Interesting.
And so the investment in health is about, I don't want to burden my children when they become a sandwich generation of them having to take care of me the same way I'm taking care of my mother. Because that is a use of time, energy, and attention that when I see it, that's not something that I want to pass on. And that is a form of intergenerational wealth. So when our kids are going to see, they're going to hear what we say through a microphone, and they're going to watch us through like a microscope. Even though you may think that they're not watching, they're watching. And so they're going to take on your habits, the way that you speak about yourself, the way that you take care of yourself. They're taking all of that in. And so that's how they're going to take care of their bodies.
And we're going to pick up with more because this is going to be a 2-part series. There's so much to unpack, and we're going to go into all of it on the next episode of Evolution Now. And that concludes this episode of Evolution Now. Stick around for next week, where we will be talking with Diana Feinstein again to learn more and go deeper into our health journey on Evolution Now.